Welcome to the deep dive. Sometimes the most insightful stories are the ones that connect events you might not immediately link together.
That's right.
Today, we're diving into a really fascinating set of sources you shared. They juxtapose recent U.S. presidencies with a pretty bold vision for the future.
hmm
Our mission here is simple. Pull out the key nuggets, give you a quick way to grasp these specific perspectives.
And we should be clear, right?
Absolutely. We're exploring the ideas in these documents. We're not endorsing any particular viewpoint here.
Exactly. And what's so interesting, what jumps out, is how these sources build a narrative. They link past events, specifically to a contrasting future vision.
Yeah.
It really makes you ask why. Why these different interpretations. So let's get into it.
Okay, let's unpack this. The source material, it kicks off describing Barack Obama's presidency, calls it one of its greatest eras.
Cites successes, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Locally and internationally, I think was the phrase.
That's it. Then, boom, it transitions straight to Donald Trump and his Make America Great Again slogan. The source frames that immediately.
As implying erasing the achievements of Obama. That's the interpretation given.
Right. And the source really digs into its view of Trump's vision.
It does. It calls it radically different, based solely on Trump's vision, it says, while disregarding the views of others.
Strong words.
Yeah. And it highlights his appeal, to struggling citizens, people wanting fast change.
And seeing him as what? Relatable? Not seen as a politician?
Exactly. Even the source notes when he called the media fake news, that relatability factor was key, according to this account.
The sources then point to moments they argue really shook national trust.
Like the statement about Hillary Clinton needing to be jailed. The source claims that made people question the entire government system.
Mm-hmm. And then later, after the election loss, calling it fake.
The source says that it just deepened the divide. It's presented as another major blow to trust.
It's quite a narrative the source constructs, isn't it?
It really is. And connecting this to the bigger picture, well, the source lays out this dramatic projected turning point.
Right. This is within its kind of hypothetical timeline.
Yes.
Yes.
Where after President Biden drops out, Trump is shot. An event, the source explicitly says, reminded people of John F. Kennedy.
And this hypothetical moment is framed as really significant.
Crucial, yeah. Supposedly cast Trump as a symbolic figure targeted by the establishment, which then, the source argues, reinforces support among those who already saw him as the answer.
The source definitely doesn't hold back on critiquing Trump's messaging and policies either.
No, it doesn't pull any punches. Paints Democrats as corrupt, media as dishonest, contrasts no wars promises with military conflicts and trade wars.
It mentions harsh immigration policies.
Labeling undocumented people as criminals,
Yeah.
and shifts away from diversity and inclusion.
Also notes cuts to Medicaid, healthcare instability.
And demands for loyalty within the Republican Party, suggesting, democracy itself at risk.
Yeah.
That's the source's take.
But the source suggests this erosion of trust wasn't just one-sided.
Right. It points out, kind of ironically, that some Democrats, like Kamala Harris in this account, publicly defending the Second Amendment.
Unintentionally aligned with Republican rhetoric, according to the source.
Yeah, contributing to this idea that the system began to lose the trust of the people from multiple angles. It's a complex picture it paints.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The sources don't just look back.
No, they pivot hard.
They present a vision for America's future. And it's positioned directly as a counterpoint to the MAGA agenda described earlier.
The very comprehensive counterpoint. It calls for things like no party affiliation in governance decisions, removing tariffs, promoting peace.
And allowing people to live whatever they want with whom they love. Through fair immigration, it says.
And this vision, it's not just policy tweaks. It's presented as a fundamental rethinking. Well, it talks about effectively ending the Second Amendment, arguing that's needed for safer communities, via a complete overhaul of gun laws. It's a huge shift proposed.
Wow, okay. What else?
Equal taxation and Medicare for all. Economic reform to boost small businesses, fund innovation.
And foreign policy.
Champions change through the UN, using the International Court or WTO for conflict resolution.
Yeah.
Very different approach.
And the source explicitly contrasts this with Trump.
Explicitly. It says Trump's MAGA agenda stands in opposition to these goals, and it stresses respecting the will of the people for what it calls a more inclusive, peaceful, and democratic future.
So you have these two really distinct pictures painted by the sources.
Exactly. One looking at recent history, focusing on challenges to trust, political divides.
And the other laying out this completely alternative future vision.
Right. So the big question for you, listening, is what does this all mean? As you think about the narratives that shape how we see a nation's path.
Yeah, how do these different visions compete? What priorities do you see bubbling up from these very different approaches described in the sources?
Definitely something to chew on long after this deep dive.
Well,